the guys would separate and go talk about porn and all of that. And then the girls would go off and talk about body image issues. And I felt like I was being told that I was supposed to have body image issues, and I didn't have that. That's not anything that I struggled with at the time. And I remember they sat all the girls down and they told us to write down what we didn't like about our physical bodies. And I was looking at everybody else's paper because I just didn't even know what to write down. And I wrote down my legs because I was like, well, my legs are big. But then I even had the thought of like, but I love my legs because they make me good at soccer. And so I just like didn't struggle with that, but knew that I struggled with pornography. And so I just thought something was wrong with me. Like, why am I struggling with this guy issue?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Naked Gospel. I am your host, Shane O'Neill. Today we are joined by Jill and Marshall Shank. Both Jill and Marshall grew up having a porn addiction. We've asked them to come in because there are a lot of kind of just myths that we believe about pornography, myself included. That pornography won't impact marriage, that pornography is a placeholder for marriage, and that none of that will be carried in or impact marriage in any way. And so we're just asking them to come in, going to have a conversation with them about how pornography did impact them, how it was carried into their relationship, and how they've known redemption in their sex life and in their communication, in spite of pornography being present in their development. So I am really excited. There's also just a widespread myth that pornography is only a guy issue. So I'm excited to hear Marshall as well as Jill's story on this issue. And they're just an incredible couple. And don't forget that it is also No Porn November. We are officially in that, where organizations and ministries come together to try and combat pornography, just create awareness. So if any of you guys listening are struggling with any of the things we're going to be talking about today, there are tons of resources available. They'll be in the show notes with discounts and whatnot. So Proven Men, Proven Women, Proven Wives. If you fit any of that and you're just looking for resources and looking for help, then do check that out, because those resources have gone a long way in my life, and they've also impacted Jill and Marshall. So let's just jump right in. They're here in the studio with us, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Guys, thank you so much for being on today. Hey, Jill. Hey, Marshall. So just for viewer awareness, I know this couple really well. I love them a lot. So thank you for being with me.
Yeah. Good to be here.
Sweet. So talkative. All right. So you guys are obviously married. How did you guys meet? What is your story?
Our story. We met at Liberty University. We both worked at the old Rockwell together. That's how I met. That's where we met, at the Rockwell.
I met her because her boyfriend at the time climbed.
Son of a gun.
And she came
That's
to climb
true.
with her boyfriend.
Yeah.
And so, good news, they're no longer together. So,
Right.
we're together now.
Makes sense. So how long did you guys date for, and engagement process, and how long have you guys been married?
Yeah, so when we met each other in college, we didn't date at all. We were just friends for about 4 years. We didn't like each other. We were very good friends, but neither of us truly didn't like each other.
At least romantically.
And, romantically.
I hope so.
We were friends, but we really didn't like each other. And then I moved to England for a year and tore my ACL when I was over there in one of the schools that I worked in. Came back. I'm from Texas, so I went home to have surgery and recover. But while I was recovering, I came up to Virginia to visit friends. Marshall was living with some of our married friends at the time, and so I stayed with all of them. And then that week, something was really different. Yep. And by the end of the week, Marshall told me that he was going to pursue me to marry me. And I said, cool, man. That works for me. And we dated for
4 months?
4 months and got engaged.
Yeah, so she was going back to England. And when she got there, you were here from like a Thursday to a Friday. And so that Sunday we had a really good day together. That's when I decided that this is the person I want to be with. Tuesday we went on our first official date of that week. And then Friday, I actually called her dad. I think it was that Friday. She had just left.
When I left, yeah.
Yeah, you had left to go to Colorado with some friends before you went back home, before you went back to England. And I called her dad and like told him who I was. And so shortly after that, I had taken a trip down to Texas to meet her family because I was serious about it. And they graciously allowed me to stay for 3 days. Only 3 days.
It was like 3 days. That's it.
Yeah. And so, so we got along. I mean, what's not to like? So, we got along really well. And so she went back to England maybe like 3 days after that, or a week after that, something like that. And then she was there till December 17th of that year. And then December 24th, I proposed. And so that was about a 4-month stint from the Friday when I called her father to. So, I mean, over that time, we were talking about getting married. We had booked a venue.
Yeah, we had like planned a lot of our wedding already when I was still in England.
Yeah.
You guys knew what you wanted.
Yeah.
We did.
And so 6 months after that, we got married. So
you were engaged longer than you dated.
Yeah.
Nice.
And we really only dated that week and the 3 days that he came to, like, we were dating like together in the same place for that week and those 3 days that he came to visit. Because literally the next time, the instant I saw him, he was proposing to me.
Yeah. That's wild.
In Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy.
And you guys have been married how long now?
4 years.
Yeah, almost 4.5 now. Yeah.
Well, I don't know how months work, but I don't think it's close to a half. June was our anniversary. So
cool.
Maybe it's October, almost November.
Sweet. Well,
4.5.
More than 4 years.
I like it. I like it all. Okay. To get into the kernel of the conversation, a lot of couples use like pornography in marriage, which is like symptomatic of like a lot of issues. Like one, like can they even perform without it? And two, like why do they need that kind of intimacy within their marriage? But then a lot of people, I mean, a majority of our population view pornography, but it's seen as like a male issue. And you guys have a really unique story in that you both were addicted to pornography before you got married. Would you guys mind just sharing your porn history for our listeners? I think that would be really helpful before we start getting into the specifics.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I saw pornography for the first time when I was 12. And then from that time until, that time throughout middle school, throughout high school, I was watching pornography regularly. Then came to school, and it dwindled a little bit, but it was still active in my life. Definitely throughout our engagement, it was something that I was struggling with. Definitely throughout our dating relationship, it was something I was struggling with the couple weeks that we were together and while she was in England. And then it all came to a head about 3 months after we were married. That's when I had told her, like, hey, this is something, I told you that I struggled with this in the past. It's not the past. And so it's very recent. And so I am struggling with it currently. So at 12 years old on the back of a school bus until, 3 months after we were married, that was kind of the
time frame.
Yeah, the time frame for me. But
I probably saw porn for the first time when I was 8 or younger. I think I just say 8, but it was around 8, but probably not any older than that. Was the first time I saw porn, and that was something that I struggled with and viewed regularly, probably all the way through my junior year of college. Once I started getting older and like understanding, I like really actively tried to stop, but it just was something that consumed me, and I was very enslaved to, and I never talked about it with anybody because that's a guy's issue. My testimony is in Proven Women books and stuff like that. But I just was always told, not told, but like the guys would separate and go talk about porn and all of that. And then the girls would go off and talk about body image issues. And I felt like I was being told that I was supposed to have body image issues, and I didn't have that. That's not anything that I struggled with at the time. And I remember a really specific day where they sat all the girls down and they told us to write down what we didn't like about our physical bodies. And I was looking at everybody else's paper because I just didn't even know what to write down. And I wrote down my legs because I was like, well, my legs are big. But then I even had the thought of like, but I love my legs because they make me good at soccer. And so I just like didn't struggle with that, but knew that I struggled with pornography. And so I just thought something was wrong with me. Like, why am I struggling with this guy issue? And it was probably, I think it was my junior year of college. I even had the courage to just look up on the internet if there was anything about girls struggling with pornography, and all I could find was an article. But that in and of itself made just that small article that I found, which was so sad that that's all I could find, gave me courage to talk about it. And the more I talked about, I just, for some reason in that instant, I just could talk about it. And I was telling my roommates and people around me, and almost every single girl I told would look at me and say, I've never said this to anybody, but yeah, I struggle with this too. And so I started to realize that. And I probably think that it was my junior or senior year was the last time that I really looked at it. It was something that I really went through alone, and I can only point to God for getting me out of that, because I just didn't have any support in it at all. Because I never talked about it, and I didn't feel the freedom to. So anyway, something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, rightly so.
But
it's an extraordinary lonely journey, I imagine. I mean, that's what I hear from you, along with a lot of bravery. So just thank you for sharing it with us. Yeah, it's very cool, Jill. I'd be interested to know, because there's this kind of, this is like a cultural myth that porn is okay, maybe even until you get married, and then a lot of those problems will go away. And the problems aren't just porn use, but also maybe what porn has taught us, maybe about intimacy or relationships or commitment, imagination and disposition towards your counterpart. And I'm not married, so I'd love to hear from you guys how porn has impacted your marriage. What are maybe some issues that you guys have had to work through, overcome, whatever they may be? I'd just be interested in y'all's response.
Yeah, I mean, I think being married, it was, sex was always something that I did alone, right, with pornography. Yeah. And it was something that I was asked the question when I was in the guys group at my youth church, talking about pornography. Have you ever found the perfect video? And the answer was always no. You're never going to be able to find the perfect video, because the perfect video doesn't exist, because what you're actually searching for is intimacy. Yeah. But what you're learning, or what I learned when viewing pornography, is that intimacy wasn't necessary for sexual acts. It wasn't something that was needed. You could have an orgasm without having intimacy. Yeah. And so, and then the other thing too is with pornography, in a matter of seconds, you could have anything, any scenario, any person, any body shape, any scenario that you could ever possibly imagine. It's been created billions times over. Yeah. And so, because of that, I think, I think it's foolish to think that you can steep yourself into that mindset that this is what sex is, this is what intimacy is, and to not come out the other end thinking, not come out the other end with at least some friction, at least. And so for me, I'm 4 years into marriage, and sex is still something that we're learning to do well together as a couple. But initially it was more emotional and spiritual than I thought it was. I had always just consumed it from a physical standpoint. You have an orgasm, then you're finished. And there was no emotion, there was no spirituality, minus the regret, the shame that you felt post that engagement. And so having a person there that you love and you care about, and then realizing that sex has very little to do with physicality. Physicality is just kind of the means by which the emotional and spiritual connection happens, I think is what I learned. And having to unlearn all the things that porn taught me was it was a hard thing. And the first 3 months of our relationship was difficult, because if there was issues within our sexual relationship, I just had pornography to fall back on and could get that release. And so so it was pornography, there's 31% of men have ED under the age of 30. I think was the latest statistic. World War II area is like 1%. And so scientists will point to pornography as a main source of that, and people will use pornography in order to be able to have intimacy, because it's the novelty is so much higher in that instance. And so and so I think the relearning aspect of what sex actually is versus what pornography taught me was where the rub was. It was where the issue was. So those were the problems that poses. Is you have to quite literally unlearn what sex is in order to be able to have good intimacy with the person you care most about in this world. So there were some hard, frustrating times for sure because of that. So
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Even then, when it comes to like just a physical act, I was watching something like TED Talk or something like that about how pornography is intentionally orchestrated, where it's like the least amount of physical contact. Like it's not even like them on top of each other. Like it's usually like one standing up, one laying down, or something like that. And so that even like the distance of the sex act itself, not to fail to mention all the emotional neglect that comes along. Because even as you say that, because like porn is a wife who will never leave you, and she'll never talk back. You'll never get in a fight. She'll pretend to be whatever you want her to be. So I can certainly relate with that. I'm sure a lot of people listening in can. So it's helpful, Marshall. Yeah. So when it comes to, again, a lot of people do assume that there's a kind of like this demarcation, this distinction between like watching porn and getting married. So whether it's somebody who hasn't viewed porn before, or somebody who is viewing porn and assumes that like marriage will fix them, what would you guys say to that? Because a lot of people think that it's like, well, I only use porn as a sexual release. Once I get married, I'll have a sexual release, and that's how the logic goes. But it's wrong. But a lot of people don't necessarily know why. So how would you guys speak into like that kind of thinking, where it's like, okay, I do watch porn, but I won't have that problem when I get married because I'll have a sexual release?
Well, I mean, going off of what Marshall just talked about, and how like the novelty is so high now, and what you're literally training yourself in your brain to act a certain way, and it's a completely different scenario. So it's two completely separate situations. So you're not like, you've trained your brain to be intimate with yourself. And so to think that you're not going to want that, even if you do have the outlet of marriage at this point, like I don't think is very realistic, because you have trained your brain to, well, this is my release. Like I have to watch this to get this end. And sex in marriage is not porn. Like it doesn't look that way. And you've trained yourself to see something and then for this next thing to happen, and it just doesn't look that way. And you know, neither of us are porn stars, and we don't like that position is unrealistic and not, you know, it's just like that's not how it is.
It's acting.
It's acting. It's not real. And so you're setting yourself up for just a disappointment, really. Like extreme disappointment. And you'll ultimately fall back into what you've trained your brain to expect.
Yeah, and I think the novelty aspect is true. Like if you can go on an app and you can just scroll through and find thousands of women in different shapes or thousands of men with different looks and body types, the expectation. I was talking to a buddy the other day who was talking about a friend that he had in high school or college that wanted to be good at sex, and so he committed himself to being good at sex, and so he just had sex with however many women as possible, and his rationale was, well, when I get married, I'm going to be very good. And as a married man who's experienced that framework within pornography, the reality of it is like that person's body is that person's body. You can't just scroll past, right? You can't just add a filter or scroll again to be able to have new novelty there to be able to get you excited, right? And there's such beauty I think you were touching on this point that marriage isn't like that, because marriage is actually beautiful and complicated. That humans are actually beautiful and complicated, that these are just actors acting. And then when they go home, they're dealing with stuff. They're not this just sexual being that just all they want is sex. At one point, they're going to have to do dishes. You know, like the reality of human life within a marriage context is so much more diverse than pornography ever gives you. And because pornography's novelty release and the dopamine releases of pornography are so high, what ends up happening is you corrupt your marriage, and that things can seem boring because they can't compare, right? They can't compare to being able to just see whatever you want to see whenever you want to see it. And what the reworking is, right, like over time in our own relationship, and as I was struggling out of pornography, it became apparent that I was just sold a lie. It was a lie. The lie that this person believed about being good at sex so that it would, be better for his wife one day. He's actually just condemning his marriage to a life where he's going to have expectations that she can't meet because she's just one person. Bodies don't change like that. And more than that, human souls are far more complex and beautiful than what the body holds, and so so just the very fact of seeing human beings and seeing the opposite sex as just a framework for physicality and for objectivity around, like, you're a piece of meat for the purpose of sex. It's like, best of luck in your marriage treating your wife like that. And that's what you're learning. And so, and I think the beautiful picture is, like, if I didn't know anything about sex prior to being married because of pornography, it would be one massive playground to be able to learn together. There's something so appealing to that innocence walking into marriage that we didn't have because of pornography. There were expectations on the table because of pornography. And without expectation, there's complete freedom. Like, we have that standard of rule for ourselves within, like, communication. If you have an expectation, you should share it, because it's unfair to have an expectation without the other person knowing it. And pornography sets expectations without you even knowing it. And so, it's not just bad for your marriage, or it's not just the lie that that you're just doing this because of marriage or to prepare for marriage, or because there's an absence of marriage. The lie that's being bought is that, and the reality of it is it's actually condemning your marriage, right? It's actually causing real serious harm in the now for something that would be in the future. And so, if you are consuming pornography, stop today. Because luckily our brains can heal themselves.
There's actually a book titled that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Brain That Heals Itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's still, that's hard work.
It is. Just like marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. People are messier than we assume. Like, we're messier than we assume. We just don't always know we're that messy because we medicate ourselves with pornography, you know? It's terrifying for me to think that our primary sex ed is porn. You know, like, that's where we learn about, like, so much of that. And I love what you guys are talking about. I was like sex as play, but in marriage, you know? There's Alistair Roberts, he's this guy that we interviewed a little while ago, and he was talking about how we've made sex a sport, like an Olympic event, and it's the person who can hold the weirdest positions and go the longest that ends up getting the win. And we do treat it like that, like it's a conquering, a championship. And then that's even like how we imagine like the honeymoon, where we finally get to like really go crazy for a whole week, you know? And like, technically speaking, like, the honeymoon is supposed to be where you first see each other naked and you're at your most vulnerable with each other, because you both are really awful at intimacy and you fumble around together. Like, it's where you're supposed to be most vulnerable, not most proficient. You know, it's where you're supposed to be weakest, not like exercise your strength. And that's been like really helpful for me, because like pornography, Lewis does this really well, where he talks about like pornography and masturbation, how it's inherently selfish, whereas sex and marriage is inherently selfless. Like, you don't pleasure yourself, someone else is pleasuring you, you know? And like, it's like pleasure sexually is only ever a gift, you know? So I hear like a lot of those threads in what you guys are saying, which is really helpful. It's helpful for me to know that what I'm reading is actually telling me the truth.
Yeah. This is a sidebar. The most vivid memory of our honeymoon for me, I don't think I've ever said this, is crying to the movie About Time while eating ice cream and drinking wine. Like, I don't, like, when I think back to our honeymoon, that's the memory that first pops into my head. And probably arguing over putt-putt.
That was
later.
Yeah.
That was later. That was the first putt-putt stint, though. We did play putt-putt that day.
Yeah.
Or that week. Yeah. Like, that's the most vivid memory, is sitting on a couch in a well, really a retirement home community is where we went on our honeymoon.
Our honeymoon is
you guys are special
story
people.
in and of itself.
Yeah, but and that's to your point. People want intimacy without vulnerability, and they are not exclusive to one another. Yeah. It's not possible to have those separated.
Yeah, and to that point, I was like, Marshall touched on like the first 3 months of our marriage being really hard. I think that I was stepping into this zone that was it is such an intimate thing, and you are being so vulnerable, and it just became even harder. It was just so hard for me to be that way. I think I wasn't expecting it because it had been so easy before. Like it was really easy, and now, you know, I don't know. And all of a sudden it was supposed to be this really beautiful, intimate, vulnerable thing, and I had a really hard time being vulnerable and
if you're
stepping
willing,
into that place.
Jill, can you play that out? Because that, like, a lot of people don't believe that exists. Like intimacy before marriage and after marriage, they can be the same thing. Like, marriage doesn't matter. But like what I hear you saying, like, no, something changed, and we all of a sudden had to start working at it. That it became real.
Yeah. So, So intimacy before marriage, it's like you want it so bad and you're not supposed to do it. And so there's like an excitement in that. And so it almost seems easy when it does happen. And then, but at the same time, you're like, crap, like that's not good, like we're not supposed to be doing this right now, we need to wait. And so, and like even pornography, like I had I knew like this is wrong, like this is bad, this is not good, I'm not supposed to be doing this. And then I get married, and that is supposed to switch, like those thoughts and the way that I feel about like up until that point, it was a negative thing. And all of a sudden it's supposed to be a positive thing. Like, you know?
Yeah.
And, like, that switch doesn't just, like, that doesn't happen. Like, my whole life has been built on, this is a negative thing. You're not supposed to be doing this. Like, guilt for doing this with that guy, or viewing this by myself here, and like, don't tell anybody about it because it's so shameful. And then all of a sudden, like, no, good now, like, beautiful, like that doesn't happen. And like, that didn't, for me, that switch didn't happen in my brain. I was doing something that was supposed to be beautiful and is good, but my brain wasn't telling me that.
And on the flip side, like, it being an emotional thing, I can feel that void, right? I can feel the void in our sex life. And the last time I watched pornography, I caught myself looking for specific scenes where the man was wanted by the woman. And it wasn't until that moment where I had like I had a self-reflection point of like, I am actively searching for being wanted. Like, actually what I don't want is pornography. I just want to be wanted. You know, in the middle of our relationship, while she's struggling with that battle of showing intimacy, and I'm struggling with the battle of performance, and then love and care and tenderness, but also sex drive, as we're dealing with the messiness of all of those things, I'm trying to find intimacy on the web. I want to be wanted by women who have no idea who I am. That contrast was the most shocking for me, that set me on the path to be able to find freedom. That was the start. So,
It's really helpful, guys. Thank you for your candor, just being so vulnerable. This is really helpful, because this is like the stuff, like even in marriage counseling, like they don't always tell you this stuff.
They should tell you. They should tell you from a long time ago.
Yeah.
Church.
I couldn't even tell you like how many females, like articles I read and conversations I have, that like will say like, I didn't know it was going to hurt. You know, like all the marriage counseling in the world, multiple sisters, a mom, like a healthy family, and no one ever told them that it might hurt. You know, and it's like, that's crazy. Like, that's crazy. Okay. Last question I wanted to look at with you guys is, so obviously a lot of different kind of like demographics of like people who might be listening or viewing this. But for the people who like have watched pornography, want to get married, have watched pornography, are in pornography and trying to break free, or have broken free from pornography, your story is very hope-giving. So like, would you like, how has redemption played out for you guys in this process? And what does it look like to have this, I don't even want to call it baggage, because I mean, if it is baggage, you guys have taken a lot of intentionality to unpackage it, right? And to like sort it, you know, so it's not just dead weight you're carrying around in your relationship. How has redemption played out with this kind of backstory in your marriage?
Yeah, I mean, I think it started with honesty, coming clean. That 3-month mark in our marriage was the moment that I told her I was struggling with this, and then things that she had needed to share, she shared as well. And you started from a playing field where there were no secrets. And so I think redemption starts where there's no secrets. And so come clean. This is the person you're going to be with the rest of your life. Like, you can work through those things. And so that's where you
like
would start.
Accepting of that honesty. Like, it's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
Yeah, it's better to have a spouse that's honest than a spouse that's lying to you. And then through that, like, open communication throughout the entire process as whomever is battling with that, and then having a game plan, right? Like, my guess is if you've watched pornography before, you've probably tried to stop watching pornography to no avail. We both know that battle. We both know that emotional, like, really frustrating struggle of trying to kick pornography. And so, so I mean, that's why I work here at Proven Men, is to be able to give resources to men and get them plugged into communities to be able to do that. And that's why we invented Proven Women, so that women can have that same process. And that's why we invented Proven Wives, so that wives who are really battling with trying to walk alongside their husbands well can have a material, a 6-week study for them exclusively to be able to walk through what it looks like to love their husbands as they try to care for their own soul in the midst of that. If their story isn't that they watch pornography. And so step into, I'm biased, so I'm going to say our resources. They're there to be able to reach out to us because we can put you in a position that I was in. Like the reason I did so well, the reason that I told my wife that I was struggling with pornography is because of Proven Men. And so, and I don't think without a group right after I had shared that, stepping right into a group, that I would have found freedom. I think I would have gone back into hiding because I knew that so well. And so, I don't like, that's my advice because that's my story. That's our story is Proven Men came alongside of our marriage. Joel Hesh, the guy who wrote it, came alongside of our marriage and said, you need to tell your wife and here's the game plan. This is where we're going to go from here. And so 4 years later, and this is the result.
4.5, Marshall.
Yeah, whatever it is. 4 and some change. I guess we can agree on.
Yeah. I think the honesty thing is, I don't know, it kind of sounds like cliche, but it's just true. And I think the honesty, being accepting of that honesty, and then saying, all right, like, what next? Like, because it's not always just like cut and dry. Like Marshall didn't tell me those things and it was like perfect. We had to like put some things in play and just work through those things together. And definitely have been redeemed. And it's awesome. But we did have to work through those things. And then I don't know, even in the things that we said and set in play, had to work through those things. And it was just kind of like a figuring out of how are we going to move forward. And
and that's not to say 4 years from now our sex life is perfect.
Right.
We're still having conversations about how to be more attentive to one another, how to meet each other's needs within that. And so, and that I think too is another issue with pornography. It's easy. It's easy to log onto your laptop and find whatever you want to find. But it's like, I can share this, I think, but Jill was like, sometimes I'm asking you to initiate, and sometimes that means, being soft and sweet and cuddly, and sometimes that means the opposite of soft and sweet and cuddly. And it's like, well, how in the world am I supposed to know when one's because one could do good things and then one could do bad things in a certain circumstance? And so it's more complicated, and I'm the same way. I have things that I like, things that I don't like. You have to have those conversations and then just be open about the reality that sex is fun, sex is good. We want to have sex, both of us, presumably, and so because of that, let's have conversations around our needs and our desires that's coming from a guy who has a lot of work to do,
Yeah, that whoever you're with can't read your mind. And so they just can't. I've heard so many girls be like, I wish you would just do this. Well, did you tell him to do that? No? Well, then he's never going to just think to do
maybe one day. I haven't given up on mind reading yet.
Maybe. Anyway. It's just don't expect
50 years and some change from now. I'm going to be able to mind read.
All right. Are you waiting for that day?
There are going to be some old fogies.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys will be able to be
I don't know.
Intimate at that age. So
it's 50 years ago. I might be dead. Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
Sorry, I took you off your train of thought.
That's okay. I'm not remember what I was saying. Oh, they can't mind reading.
Yeah. That's the point.
Yeah.
Communications is important.
Yes, very important.
Yeah. It's as good a spot as any to tie up on. So thank you guys so much for coming in and just having this conversation. It is so helpful. I love you both a lot.
Love you too, Shane.
Yeah, thank you. Hey guys, thank you for just being with us. Thank you for tracking with us. Thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, share with somebody you think would benefit from it. Well, their story kind of tells its own its own tale. The myth that porn won't invade and shape and malform your marriage is a myth. And the idea that it's like some kind of placeholder for an intimacy you'll have one day is a myth. So I'm just really grateful to be able to have a conversation like this as somebody who is hoping to get married rather soon. So thank you for joining us, and we will catch you guys next time.